My name is Aly. I am a almost 30-year-old living with multiple sclerosis or MS, and on behalf of National Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, which is March, I am going to go out on a limb and make a video just detailing some of my experience living almost 15 years with MS and talk a little bit about it. Let's go. MS, standing for multiple sclerosis, is a autoimmune condition that's neurological in nature. Everyone has white blood cells that are comprised of your B and your T cells, and their primary function is to protect the body against illness. So bacteria, viruses, everything that comes along, it's your body's defense mechanism against these different, things that we run into in daily life. And with most autoimmune conditions, these white blood cells tend to get confused, so to speak. The exact cause is not necessarily known, but there's a lot of evidence that points to viral triggers, environmental triggers, even some sort of genetic component. More and more research is being conducted every single day to try to really target the root cause of MS and other autoimmune diseases specifically. With MS, these white blood cells that their primary purpose to protect you kind of gets confused and warped, and they actually end up attacking your own body, your central nervous system and brain specifically. They go after this protective lining or coating on your nerves called myelin. Nerves are essentially like giant pathways, highways that run all the way from your brain, through your neck, through your central nervous system, all the way down to your toes. And what the white blood cells do on, accident or confusion is that they attack and chew away at that myelin that protects the nerves. So that lining ultimately gets damaged, and that can interrupt essential signals from your brain throughout your central nervous system and interrupt daily functions of life. When there is damage and inflammation that occurs with the chewing away at the myelin is when MS symptoms come out and are very evident. These little patches of damage or inflammation are called lesions, and they can be present anywhere in the brain, the spine, the neck, anywhere that the central nervous system plays a role. In my specific case, I was diagnosed with MS very young. Typical onset for the disease is not usually until your 40s and 50s or the later half of your life. So being a pediatric case, I think, had its pros and its cons. At the time, being 15 years old, I definitely didn't understand the kind of gravity or meaning of the diagnosis. And of course, when you're young at that time, you tend to gloss over things and put them to bed and not necessarily deal with them. So I would say that I wasn't fully processing the information or diagnosis or really educating myself on what to expect and exactly what the disease entailed until probably the latter half of my 20s. And I've recently gotten very involved and tried to become more of an advocate and spokesperson for the disease itself, as well as the National MS Society. It's become an extremely important factor in my life. So I want to do as much good as I can to help educate those that may not be necessarily aware of what MS is or have someone in their lives that is impacted by the disease, and kind of help pave that pathway for open dialogue and communication about it. For my specific case, my first presenting symptom was optic neuritis in my right eye, which optic neuritis is extremely common for a first telltale symptom of MS. Optic neuritis is when the optic nerve, which is behind the eye, gets inflamed and swollen because that is part of the attacking point or one of the attacking points of MS. For whatever reason, I'm not sure. I lost complete vision in my right eye at that time, and while the doctors could not find anything wrong with my physical eye or anything, they did notice that I had swelling behind the eye itself, and that prompted an MRI, which did end up showing multiple lesions in my brain at that time. And of course, I did go to the hospital and have further testing conducted including a lumbar puncture, which was where they pull spinal fluid. It was horrible. I hope I never have to have another one of those again. They pull spinal fluid to test certain enzymes, I believe, in that fluid, and that can be also an indicator of MS. I was sent to the Mayo Clinic, I think for further diagnostic purposes, because me being so young and MS not necessarily being common at that age group, they wanted to just really be sure of the diagnosis, but turns out that it was, and I have been living with it and dealing with its challenges throughout this period of time. It definitely has taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot of resilience, patience, and understanding of my body and the environment around me. The biggest, I would say, challenge has been managing the therapeutic medications that I've been on. I have been on a variety of different ones, and currently I'm being treated with Kesimpta, which is a self-injectable pen. It's one of the newer therapies on the market. It's just amazing to think how far, even in this short time span of my life, we have come in advancements, progression, and research in disease-modifying therapies to treat MS. Right now, there is no cure, unfortunately, but with just how much progress has been made from my diagnosis to 15 years later, is just amazing to see, and I know that there's so much more development and awareness and advocacy going towards the disease as diagnoses are being made earlier and earlier on. While I was, considered a pediatric patient, I think to an extent I'm grateful. I think we were able to catch it early, and although will have to live with it for a longer period of time, we've been able to really manage as best we can the progression of the disease itself and try to figure out, what the right recipe is to keep it quiet. The challenging part in treating MS is that not everyone has the same story and not everyone has the same symptoms. They definitely can be similar, but I think that's why it's so important for people that are dealing with the disease to speak out and have open lines of communication with each other and be supportive, because it can feel like a very isolating illness. The Google rabbit hole of, looking up your symptoms and trying to relate to someone that might have felt it, I'm guilty of doing that so much, is kind of a dead-end street because no one's story and no one's experience with MS is the same. I am extremely lucky and fortunate to have just the best support system and the best doctors that really understand how difficult it can be navigating this invisible illness. One of the biggest challenges in my personal life is looking completely fine and willing and abled on the outside, but definitely having this internal struggle and feeling not okay all the time on the inside, and trying to communicate that and having others around me understand it. Another big challenge for me is that all of the disease-modifying therapies have a commonality in that their goal is to suppress the immune system that's currently overactive and, doing the wrong actions. So I have been essentially immunosuppressed for most of my life on purpose because of the therapeutics. That can lead to its own set of challenges. Being sick constantly, just being a little bit more, having to be a lot more careful just in my daily routine in life of germs, viruses, bacteria, because it can mean something different to me getting, for example, COVID or the flu than it might mean to someone with a healthy, normal functioning immune system. There are two layers to getting sick, with MS. It's you've got to be careful that you don't encounter something that you might not be able to fight because you don't have your full immune system intact on purpose. And also, getting sick can trigger overactivity again and can really be heightening for potential for a relapse because your body just goes into overdrive, and that really wakes up your white blood cells trying to do the right thing, but in tandem, they can simultaneously do damage to yourself. I tend to just get hit with fatigue harder than maybe most people, and there are some days where I just absolutely have to stay in bed, and that is what my body is telling me to do, and I have to listen. Otherwise, if I push myself and really ignore it, I pay the consequences. I've become so in tune with it, and that's a beautiful thing because I feel like our bodies are a vessel and we only have one. So if it's telling you to do something, it's sending you a message. So just understanding, what's right, what's wrong, and doing my best to really advocate for myself. If there are people that I know are actively sick or, it's flu season and things are going around, I tend to be a little bit more conscientious about not going out and just, getting my flu shot as best as I can to protect myself. But of course, I live, downtown Chicago and have a job where I'm constantly out in front of people and exposing myself. So I'm not perfect and definitely have not been able to avoid everything. And it's that delicate balance of not putting yourself in a bubble and locking yourself away, and also just being very careful and trying your best to protect yourself. So finding that fine line has definitely been a challenge for me, but something I'm actively working on. For a long time for me, and this might sound silly or, I don't even know the word, silly or not fully making sense. I was honestly ashamed. I had a lot of trouble disclosing to people that I have MS. I think the shame, almost, if that's the right word, came from the idea that I didn't want anyone around me, whether it's relationships, friendships, employers, family, to treat me any differently than they normally would. And I didn't want someone to judge me or say, kind of treat me delicately because of this condition. I am a completely, fully functioning, almost 30-year-old now that can do everything that a normal, person can. And while I do have to be a little bit more careful sometimes and really tamper my expectations for things, I never wanted someone to use that as, see you as a liability, or didn't want to educate themselves about the disease or do the right research or jump to conclusions maybe. When you Google MS, there's, I think, a lot of misinformation and bad information out there about it. Some people have this connotation of, MS, I knew someone that was a family member and they ended up in a wheelchair or they were paralyzed. Not to diminish the fact that that is a real possibility with MS. It very much so is, but it is not the only outcome. There is a world where someone with MS does not have that outcome, who lives a happy, healthy, fully functioning life. And I intend to be a primary example of that. And I hope that gives people some hope and clarity on what the disease can entail. I'm becoming so much more confident in my own skin, talking about it and having discussions about it with people, which is just a beautiful feeling. And yeah, I never, want to feel trapped in my own skin and that I'm dealing with this that someone will never understand or has this negative connotation or wrong opinion about. It's so important to me that while I have this condition, it is not everything to me, and I will probably be living with it for the rest of my life. Hopefully there will be a cure in my lifetime. I am so hopeful for that, and I'm grateful for all of the research and groundbreaking, strides and progress we've made. But if that doesn't happen, I want those in my life to know, and for strangers to know, that it is possible to beat this disease. It's possible to come back. It's possible to heal. And my full intention is to be a living, breathing example of that. So in the fall of 2023, I was hit with a series of unfortunate events, is the best way that I can probably explain that. I had my wisdom teeth removed. Not fun for anyone, but especially not for me. And just had a series of complications with it that I don't think most experience. And again, just dealing with a little bit more of a sensitive situation and a body that doesn't react normally was not on my side. And, I'd had COVID at the time. I got both strains of the flu. I had just moved to a new city. So I think I was just, hit back to back to back in an environment that I wasn't necessarily used to. That series of unfortunate events did end up triggering a relapse for me. And it was the most serious relapse, I would say, severe relapse I've had in my lifetime. I've had multiple lesions in my brain for quite some time since diagnosis, but this relapse in particular elicited some lesions in my cervical spine, which is like your neck area, base of your neck and higher, and then also down all the way into my spine and like lumbar and thoracic areas of my spine. And that got scary because I think when you deal with progression that it starts to involve your spine, it manifests itself as symptoms in your legs, arms, back, all of these areas that are very crucial. Not that your brain's not crucial, but for mobility, physicality, it got to be very evident. I went numb from basically my collarbone down. I could not feel my legs, my hands, my arms. There was a portion of my rib cage on both sides that essentially felt like constantly that it was being crushed, like broken. It wasn't necessarily pain. It was just this feeling of complete numbness. Not even tingling, just numb. I could not feel myself sitting down in a chair. I lost all mobility. I couldn't walk correctly. I couldn't feel my feet in shoes. I couldn't walk upstairs or downstairs. I was essentially bedbound, and this happened very quickly. It was a very rapid decline, probably over 2 weeks. My body was just in a state of complete inflammation and damage, so I was hospitalized after that, and unfortunately with MS, there's really no treatment for when relapses occur. It's a wait and see kind of game, and that for me was, as you can imagine, extremely challenging because I'm a very active individual, and of course when your life gets very severely upended and changed very drastically, it can be tough to mentally grasp that. I really struggled, I think, with the ideas of, is this forever? Is this my new life? Am I going to be numb like this for forever now? What is it ever going to go back to normal? Am I ever going to heal? Is the damage permanent? All of those ideas were really just swirling around in my brain, and it was extremely depressing time for me. I had family come, and I just was in the hospital, and it felt really out of body is a good way to describe it. Like I was there, mentally sharp and still myself, but my body was not my own in that time, and it just felt like I wasn't able to feel anything. That drastic of a change just was so tough to comprehend. It was, you watch someone touching your knee and not being able to feel the sensation. It's an experience that's tough to explain, and it's tough to understand still to this day. The neurologists, can only do so much, I think, to provide insight as to why it's happening and what this looks like on the inside. And, you understand it conceptually, but when it's happening to you, you really are only focused on one thing, which is, when am I going to get my sensation and feeling back? I met with physical therapists that had to teach me how to hold a fork, how to walk, how to touch every single finger to, its own. Just basic functioning human tasks. It felt like my whole life was just ripped from me very quickly. And I understand, I have a form of MS called relapsing remitting. So that basically means there are periods of time where you go into remission and the MS is dormant or quiet and lesions scar over and essentially heal or go quiet. And then there can be a triggering event, whether that's sickness, surgery, illness, or it doesn't have to have an underlying reason, that all of a sudden, you're in a state of relapse and you fall backwards again and there's damage that's being done. And this was a major one for me, obviously. The MRI showed I had active new lesions in my cervical spine, my thoracic spine, my lumbar spine, my brain, that were all bright white, which means highly active and new. I even had some old ones that had lit up again and were reactivated. So it was a doozy. I was in the hospital for, I believe, 4 days, and I was receiving intravenous, IV steroids. Steroids are really just, their purpose is to calm down inflammation and get the body to almost stop reacting and attacking itself. It's the only therapy that I'm aware of that is available for relapse treatment specifically. So I had to get these steroids, and of course steroids make you feel crazy, just emotional highs and lows, insomnia, just not really feeling like myself. So adding on to just the emotional pressure and stress of what was going on physically was very challenging. I think something important to those that have MS and have undergone steroid therapy is that it is not an immediate fix. And I was full on expecting to leave the hospital fully recovered because I was receiving very high doses of steroids. I forget what the Solumedrol milligrams were, but I knew that I was receiving a lot. I expected almost this overnight cure and for my body to go back to normal. And it can be disheartening for sure when that doesn't happen and your expectation is that you will automatically feel better, because why wouldn't you? And I remember everyone telling me at that time that steroids are not this magical cure for inflammation. They take time to work, they take time to identify the problem, and even at high dosages like I was on, it's not something that's going to just miraculously make things better. I would say as I left the hospital not feeling recovered or even having any sort of sensation back, I was so disheartened and disappointed. And again, I just went through, as I went home, just this really tough time grappling with this new experience and feeling like, did I just go through all of that for nothing? Is this the way it's going to be forever? All of those questions continuously, swirled around in my head. So while everyone's MS journey is probably vastly different, I can be sure that at one point or another, whether it's during a relapse or not, people experiencing the disease have had these similar feelings of, am I ever going to get through this? What if I just give in? Am I going to be this way forever? There's no cure. What can I do to remedy this situation? And that is one of the toughest feelings, and I can empathize. I wish there would have been someone that I could watch, even if it was on the other side of a phone screen during that time. Sorry, it's hard a little bit to talk about still, which is crazy because it's a long time removed from that. But I wish there was someone that I could watch and almost tell me that it's gonna be okay. Because no one was really able to tell me that at that time. I would ask the question, and I don't think anyone wanted to be held responsible if the outcome was not a positive one. But what I can tell anyone that's going through a similar experience, whether it's MS or something completely different, is that there is, a light on the other side of that horrible dark place. And the miraculous thing about bodies healing and, a combination of medication advancement, familial and friendship support, and education and awareness is that you will get through it. Bodies are an amazing thing, And while can be so much carnage, damage, and, all of the inflammation and horrible things that MS brings, it has the ability to heal too. And I want to make that very clear. Just because something, very drastic happens, such as me literally losing all of my feeling in my whole body and extremities, that does not mean that that is permanent. There were many times during that period in my life where I just wanted to give up and kind of throw in the towel and say, this is, the way it's going to be from now on, and that is extremely depressing and hard to deal with. And there were, days I didn't leave my bed because I didn't want to even be reminded of the fact that I couldn't feel anything. And even though everyone was pushing me to just really get out and continue to live my life, I was angry. I was mad at, people who didn't understand or couldn't understand the things that I was feeling. It's not something that you can easily explain, or, someone goes through that in a common lifetime. But the one thing that kind of kept me going was clinging on to the hope of the promise that, well, my body, was normal at one point. It can get back there, I think, with positivity, time, and, the support and love from everyone else around me. Time is a factor in my life that has proved to be something that's very important. Patience and time. Patience is something that I continue to struggle with, but working on it. Time heals. And I know that sounds incredibly cliche. You've probably heard that on a million, podcasts talking about when you're going through a heartbreak or a tough breakup or whatever the case may be, that time heals all things. In my case, it was 100% true. I needed to give my body time and the grace and the energy to, really heal. I just want, whoever's watching this video to understand that that is a real possibility, because in those moments it did not feel like it was one. I am 98% recovered today. I would say that the, healing started slowly and took a while, but over time, probably the course of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I very gradually started to be able to feel again. I can't exactly say if it was like this overarching feeling. It kind of started in various places, and I just slowly started to gain sensation back. I remember waking up specifically at 4 a.m. one morning, randomly, and I got out of bed, I think, to get water, and I was like, holy shit, for lack of a better term, I can feel my legs. I can walk to the kitchen, I can feel them. And I recorded myself just in case it was some sort of dream or fluke or whatever. And I look back on that video now and I tell that person that hopefulness and that, positivity of being so happy and thrilled in that moment, to just remind, myself of that. And over that next, course of, again, 6 to 8 weeks, I started slowly gaining sensation back everywhere. What that experience gave me is a ton of perspective. I have definitely never taken a day for granted since that. I have lived completely with intention and, understanding that not every day is promised, and not every day is promised as the same as you are in this condition now. I am very grateful to be where I am today, fully in remission and on a new drug therapy. I actually will have an MRI coming up to see how progress is doing, and if, I'm still in a state of remission, because it's been a year on this new medication. But I've come a long way since that relapse, and healing is possible. I hope that I'm an example of that. And just because someone, is going through a relapse right now, or whatever the case may be, does not mean that you're stuck in it. And it does not mean that MS will win. And it does not mean that that is the definition of you for the rest of your life. It's super empowering to be able to tell my story and hope that it might help someone going through something similar or not. I think it applies for a lot of different instances in life where you think something, a situation, a time period, a moment is permanent. The way that you feel and the way your current situation is might last forever. And how are you ever going to get over it? How are you ever going to push through? But you will. And the power of strength and healing is incredible. And like I mentioned, time, giving yourself time, and the ability to just see things for what they are and gain a massive sense of perspective of this is your life and you have to take it for what it is and make the best of a situation, even if it's a really awful situation. I have learned that and I hold on to that every single day. I thank God. I don't know, I'm not a super religious person, but I do tend to, thank God for giving me the chance. I think it was meant to happen to me to be able to do some good and be able to communicate some sort of positivity or message. I feel like MS has genuinely given me a purpose in life, which sounds insane. I think every situation can be looked at from different optics, and I certainly have a different view of it now than I did. So I hope that this serves as a reminder to someone that it's going to be okay. And even though it may not seem that way right now, it will be. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for listening to a stranger talk at you on social media and give life advice. I am an open book for any sort of questions, comments, concerns, or, really anything to talk about MS or life in general and how that experience really impacted me in the way that I live my life today. I plan to be making many more educational and informative videos about this topic and just lifestyle in general moving forward. Happy National MS Awareness Month, which is the month of March. Thank you so much for watching.